Hey everybody, my name is Mason. Thanks for watching this video. About a year ago, I bought this camera. It's the Fujifilm X100T. It's my favorite camera in the world. It goes with me everywhere I go. I shoot with it almost on a daily basis, both for my freelance gigs and my full-time photography position. I am about to sell this though. It's actually on eBay right now because I am going to buy the X100F. And I only thought it would be fitting if, before I got rid of this camera, I looked back at the last year to see what my favorite images were. So I have a collection of about 30 images that I'm going to look through, talk about how I got them, and what my mindset is when I'm shooting with this camera. So this is my friend Zach. He's a skateboarder. I asked him if I could come and shoot him while he's doing it. By the way, if you're a photographer and you're needing subjects, skateboarders, by and large, love getting their picture taken. That's my experience, at least. I love the shot. It's one of my favorite portraits I did all year long. When I do portraits, I don't like shooting senior-style photos. Now, those have their place, but for me, I like to tell a story. And a lot of times, there needs to be like or some second element outside of the person being there. So in this case, he's got the skateboard with him, his glasses, and you can see that it's in a skate park by the thing he's sitting on. It looks like people grind on that all the time. Another great thing about the X100 series is the dynamic range is incredible. So I was able to, in Lightroom, really boost the shadows on his face and then tone down some of the highlights on his arms. Now, I did this at an engagement shoot. It was not my primary camera. I had a 5D Mark III with, I think, like an 85. But I used the X100 on and off when I wanted to get some wider shots or if I wanted to get really close. I love the 35mm lens. It is not too wide. I can get pretty close to people's faces without there being like a lot of distortion. But it is wide enough that I can do some pretty nice looking landscapes. The closer you get with a 35, the more pronounced the center of the image will be. So you have to be pretty intentional whenever you're shooting portraits with this 35mm lens, because then you can kind of accentuate whatever's in the center. I shot this at 2.2, so you can kind of see how with this lens at 2.2 it's still pretty soft. It kind of gives that dreamy feel, especially with the light leak at the top right coming in. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I'm a full-time staff photographer for the University of Oklahoma. We do, I work in web communications, so we work on a lot of the marketing, advertising, online content, social media. Anyway, this was in the middle of a video shoot that we were doing with children. And this girl, she is beautiful, she's cute, she was all in a jumpsuit, and we were out on the tarmac with planes. And anyway, I thought it looked super cool. And again, this is a classic chrome I shot in. It gives that nice vintagey look. This is an image that I shot of my niece randomly while we were out at my in-laws pool. One thing about the X100 series is that they're small, which allows me to get the shot and get shots that I otherwise might not have if I was just shooting with like a 5D or something, because I don't want to carry that thing everywhere I go. It's bulky, it's cumbersome, it's pretty intrusive. But I can have this X100 outside on a table or a chair while I'm chilling or swimming, and when I see a shot, I can take advantage of it and get it right then and there. Again, telling a story, I love having things in the foreground to make your image feel like it has more depth. And then I love my niece's freckles as well. And I shot this at 2.2 as well. This is an image that I took with Norma. She's one of my interns. This was in the studio, and this was at 4.5. Now, this really shows off how sharp this lens can be. Again, wide open at 2 or 2.8, it's pretty soft, but if you back it off to about 4.5, I've noticed that anywhere between 3.5 to 5 is a really, really nice, sharp image. Another shot of my niece, we were at my cousin's wedding. Just to give you an example of some of the low light capability, this is at ISO 4000, wide open at f2. And yeah, first off, I wasn't the photographer at the wedding, and I broke my own rule of never bring your camera to a wedding that you're not shooting at professionally, because that's just really tacky. However, again, with this X100, I can just stick that right in my pocket, my jacket pocket, and nobody will ever see it. So when the time comes that there's a cool moment happening, I can pop that out, take a quick photo, change the settings accordingly, and then get the photo that I need and get the shot, and be as unobtrusive as possible. Right after this, I put it right back in my jacket pocket and just enjoyed the celebration with my friends and family. So I shot this image. I think this was outside Portland, Oregon. I can't remember what the mountain was, um, but it was just a small little hike. And as my friend and I were going up, we saw the skateboarder. He was there. There was another photographer shooting, and I didn't want to get the skateboarder doing his thing, grinding down. Honestly, the X100 is not well suited for that, and I think it would be too wide to get what I wanted to get, what I saw in my head. So instead of shooting the skateboarder, I was like, let me get this scene of the photographer taking the photo of the skateboarder and make it more about the photographer. So the photographer was just kind of camping right there. I sat right behind him and just waited for the shot for him to come up and jump on the rail. This was at F2, by the way. I don't really think this is a great image. However, this was the only image that I could find that I liked where I used the internal flash. So I was really impressed with it. This was that ISO 3200. My aperture was at 2.0. And yeah, I had the built-in internal flash fire off, and I think it looks pretty good for as small of a little flash as it is. It really distributes the light pretty evenly, so I was happy with that. This was in, I think this was in Nevada. One of my favorite images. I knew a lot of the times if I like the framing of, or I like the composition of an image, I will camp at a spot and just wait till the right circumstances present themselves. So in this case, I knew that I was seeing airplanes flying over the building, so I was like, oh man, I got to get a shot of like this airplane taking off right behind this building. Fortunately, as the plane was taking off, a couple was crossing. I just was at the right place at the right time. This was also classic chrome. Yeah, so sometimes you just get an image and you don't know why you like it. This is one of those images. I don't necessarily think it's like the best image I shot of the year by any means. However, I find myself coming back to it and appreciating the composition and the black and white. Maybe it's the squares and how they um, and how I don't know, but I like it. There it is. This is a shot of my wife and my dog Poppy, and I shot this at 3.6. They're both pretty sharp, and I did this on a tripod actually with the Fuji app, because later on I actually went and jumped in front of the camera myself to do a family photo. But I thought this one actually turned out better than the family portrait did. One thing great about the Fuji cameras is that you can shoot in a 16:9 aspect ratio, and when you do that, it doesn't save it in 16:9. If you're still shooting in RAW, you can go back and reshape it however you want. But I like being able to see the 16:9 composition in my viewfinder and in the LCD screen. So that helps me frame things up in more cinematic ways. Another example, this is also 16:9, is this little puppy. It was in Louisiana, and my brother-in-law surprised us all with a little puppy. And so while it was sleeping, I went and took some photos of the puppy paws. Thought it was really cute. So I included this photo on here to show the colors that you get right out of camera. Now this was processed with the Pro Neg standard, and I boosted up the contrast just a little bit. I did shoot this in macro mode. Another great thing about the X100s is that you can shoot in macro mode and get fairly close to your subject. Now again, I don't know what I would ever use this for or why I want it, but visually it's pleasing to me. I love the colors, the green, the blue, and the white on top. I actually saw this when I was driving home from work one day, pulled over on the side of the road and exposed for the clouds because I knew I could bring up my shadows in post. The photo, when I brought it into Lightroom, I could not see the grass or the trees almost at all. They were completely dark. So I'm really surprised at the dynamic range that you get when you bring these raw files into Lightroom. You can really boost up the shadows and also turn down the highlights without losing a lot of detail. So I really appreciate that. Another landscape, I believe I shot this in Utah, of some canyons, and look at how sharp it is. This is shot at f7, ISO 640, midday. One 1,000th of a second. And yeah, I'm so impressed with this camera. The 16 megapixel sensor really gets the detail. Here's another landscape. It's kind of an overcast day, so I decided to do edit it in black and white. Again, this was shot at f9, so I could get that bike in the foreground and focus, as well as the valley all the way to the back. This is right at the top of a waterfall, and there's this woman just sitting on the rock there, and I had to get a photo of her. So, again, if I had a 5D, if I had my 5D with a big 50 or 7200 lens, she probably would have noticed that and been very aware of me being there. And so when I raised up my camera to take the photo, she's not really noticing me because it's not intrusive and it's not in the way. And that's one of the best things about this X100. I shot this on the same day. I exposed for the trees, and I was able to drop down the highlights of the clouds in the background because they were pretty blown out initially. But again, if you shoot raw, you have that extra image data that you can push those highlights down. Without my buddy David standing there in the bottom right, you would have completely lost any sense of scale, and it would have been kind of boring. But having him stand there, it just gives a really nice sense of scale. Speaking of scale, this is in macro mode. I shot this in macro mode, and it's of a flower in the botanical gardens in Oklahoma City. And this is one of my favorite shots that I've taken in macro mode, for sure. The detail's insane. I shot this at f6.4, ISO 640. And man, look at that. I love it. I love the colors. That's one great thing about the X100 is that you can use that focus ring to manually focus your shots. So this is a shot of a German blue ram in my aquarium. I shot this at f6, but even at f6, so long as you lock the focus on an object that's pretty near you, you can still have some pretty nice bokeh. Because this camera is so small, I take it everywhere. I literally take it everywhere with me. So that allows me to take cool random photos like this at a bar, out playing pool with my friends, and not feel burdened by having gear on me. Because it's really not gear. I see this X100T camera more as an extension of myself. And I know that sounds corny, and you've heard it said 100 times before, but I'm not kidding. There's something about this camera that makes you want to shoot. And makes you want to bring it with you. Sometimes I feel a little bit naked whenever I do not have this camera, especially if I'm, walking or driving in front of some kind of scenic place. And again, as you get above 1600 ISO, you start to notice the noise. But really, it's not. I mean, the noise to me looks more like grain, and I don't mind it. I think it adds its own effect, and yeah, I really like it. So like I said earlier, I am a staff photographer. My full-time job is a photography and videography position at the University of Oklahoma. So a lot of the times I'm out shooting the campus or students to get promotional content either for our social media or for different departments within our university. I've been shooting for about 2 years now, and I've heard it said you can only take so many photos of the same building. And while that's true, there's no excuse to not take a new and interesting photo. Again, a lot of that is playing with perspective, playing with aperture and shutter speed, and it's playing with composition, with framing, with subjects in the frame or out of the frame. You have to be pretty creative to find ways to do that. So this photo and the following few are actually all part of a photo project I was doing for the School of Visual Arts. They needed some content for their websites that just showed students being creative or working with their hands, and so I was scheduled to go to a lot of the different labs and classes and studios to try to get new perspectives of students working, doing their thing, getting their education. If I had a 5D Mark III, and I have one, if I were to bring that to these classes, people would have frozen up. People would have instantly known, hey, there's this guy, he's got a big camera, I better smile, I better look good. And again, I don't want to be intrusive to my surroundings. I want to be a fly on the wall as much as I can, and I want to get as much candid images as I possibly can. Again, trying to tell a story. We have students in the background, but the focus right now is on their work in the foreground. One challenge you will face when shooting with the 35mm lens is if you want to fill your frame, especially with a person, you're going to have to get really close to them. So with this photo, it's a great example of how so much of storytelling, especially through one still image, so much of that is showing off the context. So for instance, here we have a lot of the tools on the table. We have her backpack right behind her. You can see that she's focusing in on these little metal things that she's going to stick in the skull. Like I said earlier, a large part of my job is finding new ways and new perspectives, new angles to take photos of things we've already got. So actually, I took a lot of photos like this, and there's of students kind of at an eye level or a lower perspective. But yeah, I stood up on a chair for this one so I could get a new angle. I wanted to include this photo because I think it's a great example of the detail that this camera is capable of capturing. So I shot this at f5, handheld at 1/500th of a second, ISO 640. It was an overcast day, but if we zoom in, you can see that this droplet that's hanging off the tulip actually shows the reflection or the mirrored image of Bazell Library in the background. And this image has been used a lot on OU's campus. So I've said this a lot. I know it's a recurring theme here, but I do not want to be the photographer that shows up at an event and everybody instantly hears him and sees him, and then they're put on guard. My X100T, it's small, it's unobtrusive, and on top of that, it has a silent shutter feature where you can turn off the sound the camera makes, and you cannot hear it, especially outside in a setting like this. Nobody could hear when I was taking a photo. I shot this, I think it was a day after the shootings in Florida at an LGBTQ club, and this was a memorial service that students and faculty and staff were invited to on OU's campus to just honor victims and then also other LGBTQ community members. So our last photo is of the good old Memorial Union on OU's campus. A lot of the times cameras and camera sensors have trouble with bricks, and you'll see a lot of aliasing, but I really don't have that much trouble with that on the X100. So 20 minutes later, you're still here. I'm impressed. Those are some of my favorite photos from the year. I'm very, very happy with this camera. The only reason I'm selling it is just to get the X100F. I'm excited to see what that'll bring. The 24 megapixel sensor is going to be awesome. That'll be great. A great addition. I'm excited about the joystick on the back and the extra dial. I don't know about the. I don't know if I'm gonna love the ISO dial changing to lift it up to move. What I do basically right now is I have this function button right here as my ISO. So that way when I'm shooting, I got my aperture and then I got shutter speed right here that I can ride. Then whenever I want to get to ISO, I just hit the function button on top of the camera. Really very similar to Canon, right? You have that function button in the Canons to change the ISO, and you can do it all one-handed. That's what I've been doing. I don't know if I really want to change that, but maybe I will. But yeah, I'm super excited about the X100F and super thankful that a year ago I bought this camera, the X100T, and I'm looking forward to making some new images with the 4th iteration in the X100 series. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you had any thoughts or comments on anything I said or any of the pictures you might have seen, I would love to hear them from you. And if you want to get in touch with me, follow @thedrums on Instagram. That's @thedrums, DRUMMS, 2 M's. Or you can check out my website, masondrum.com. And yeah, thank you so much.